Angeles. And I want to talk about, among other things, my ankle, where I got shot in the foot by police projectile. I don't know if you could see that. Well, let me take my shoe off. It's pretty minor compared to, of course, a lot of things that happen to people. But there's my ankle and my foot, and it's less swollen up than it's less swollen than it was. But this is like where I got shot, and this is where it bounced or something. I don't know. Anyways, it's just starting to bruise. And so what happened was this. There was a protest at City Hall on the 25th, and there was actually three actions taking place at once at City Hall, and the actions were a Latino protest, Justice for Vanessa, another one for solidarity with Portland, and I don't really know who organized that. And the third one was a sort of like ongoing Black Lives Matter camp or Black Lives Matter action at City Hall, where there's a BLM camp, a temporary autonomous zone. So, anyways, what happened was the Justice for Vanessa action left. Everything was happening on the west side of City Hall, and the Justice for Vanessa action left, and they marched like a three-quarters of a mile away to Placita Alvara Street. And the other two actions were still there, and there was a short marched around the corner down the street to the federal building, where some people smashed in some windows. And again, this is like the kind of thing you always see when there's a political movement and when there's a very and the epicenter is that it gets co-opted and taken over. And so what I saw was this. I saw BLM action with a bunch of young black blockers out there, some young anarchists, peaceful march, people making a lot of noise. And then when we got to the federal building, what happened was they, like five or six people, they threw, this is all on my live stream from the 25th. They threw a smoke bomb, like this pink smoke bomb at the cops. And then actually before that, broke some windows. So they went out and smashed some, I think like four or five big windows in the federal building. And that was a small group of people, like five, six, maybe 10 people with two or three doing that. Again, this is on my live stream and everybody else's who was live streaming there. There was no police presence at all. I mean, not visible. And there was absolutely no news coverage except a helicopter. So the cops came out of the federal building or whoever they were, and inside, some people photographed it. This is I'm looking at photos from a filmmaker named Steve Goody, who was live streaming and filming. You can see these on Facebook, Steve Goody, Gute, in Los Angeles. And the pictures are inside. You could see marshals, DHS, armed up with ties, ready to detain people and make arrests. So the march went back to City Hall and then past City Hall, and this is all happening in like a 20-block radius in downtown Los Angeles on the 25th. Marched to the federal building, and when we got to the federal building, from the court, I'm sorry, we were at the court was where they broke the windows first. Then we went to the federal building a few blocks away, and again, it was like four or five people smashed out about four or five windows with little hammers. Everybody was doing it. It was in black bloc. And I wasn't really understanding it to be part of BLM or related, other than that it was all happening in the same space. So they smashed the windows. The police showed up and just started, popping off with less lethal projectiles into the crowd. That's when I got shot in the ankle. Steve Goody, this other person who was down there live streaming. Again, I'm looking at his Facebook page. He got hit in the back with a club, with a baton. So this is, like I said, the thing that always plays out. And, historically, there's no violence unless there's the police. And when the police show up, that's when it gets violent. People smash windows. That for sure happened. And they broke glass. And that's very different than beating people down in the street and restraining them and, having DHS officers detaining people. And so this is also happening in Los Angeles, not like Portland. But there have also been a lot of troops in the street in LA, National Guard, and that was at the very beginning of all of these protests. And if you know downtown Los Angeles, uh, there's a lot happening in a very small area, the geography. There's Skid Row, which is 2 blocks from City Hall, which is right across the street from the police station. The court building is a couple blocks away, the federal building. So it's a very rich history of protesting. There's also a very rich history of Kim, you pay for the damages then. Well, I don't know what damages, but I can tell you this. I'm just about to sign up for the National Lawyers Guild class action against the LAPD for violence against protesters and journalists, which is what I am, a journalist. And I'm also going to report to a couple other um, age groups who, have databases and keep track of journalists being injured by law enforcement, and it's of course on the rise with the Trump administration. Anyways, back to this. There's definitely some people breaking windows, but Los Angeles and the LAPD has a long history of racist violence and corruption. They're not denying it. Nobody's denying it at the police department. It's one of the first things that when a new captain comes in, they always just admit it. We get it. Rampart. And what they're trying to do now is they've created a new committee or division and put this woman, Tingarides, a black woman, African American, I think she's African American, a black woman named, I don't know what her rank is. She's married to a white cop named Phil Tingarides. Anyways, this is the big press announcement today. The problem is that the LAPD has been under 2 10-year consent decrees from the Department of Justice. That means the Department of Justice takes them over for 10 years. 2 of them for 10, doesn't, I mean, for a limited amount of time, but for 10 years is the duration of both of them, or longer, I think, for one of them. So that's the history of the LAPD, violence, corruption, all of these things playing out there. And the idea of defunding the police is really, being met by this in Los Angeles, where it's being met by this movement for them just to regroup and reform, which of course they're not doing. I'm sure they're trying to keep funding. And so that's not going to work because it's a closed system. As one of the stipulations to get off the last consent decree from the Rampart scandal, the LAPD had to meet all these criteria. And one of the stipulations was they had to form a police commission, which they did, and which is, where Black Lives Matter in LA has been for years, really just taking it right there every Tuesday at 9 a.m. And so the problem is that it's a closed system. There's no meaningful citizen oversight, and the citizens have, none of the stakeholders have any power there. But it's proved as a sort of powerful weapon anyways. Sheila Hines, Waukesha Wilson was killed in custody death by the LAPD. Uh, Famously threw her niece's ashes on police chief Charlie Beck, who stepped down. Black Lives Matter definitely forced him out of office, and they definitely used the police commission tool. So they used it against him, but the larger issue is that it's a closed system. Also, as a stipulation of the last consent decree, the LAPD had to do something where they had an early warning system. And I'll get into some of these comments in a minute. They had an early warning. They had to have an early warning system for bad apples, and the problem they do have that. It's actually called Teams 2, and it's the system where if an officer gets too many complaints, every time an officer gets a complaint, it gets flagged to his supervisor. So everybody has to check the box all the way up to the commissioner. I believe all the way up. Or theoretically, that's what's supposed to happen. And so, if there's anything anomalistic, people who are getting a lot of complaints they can't transfer and they can't get promoted. It makes it very challenging. Problem is, it's a closed system again. It's just the only, LAPD is an organism whose nature it is to expand and to take over. And with the, federal government's 1030, I think it's called 1033 program, where military grade military equipment is given to all these. It's given to all these police, local law enforcement, agencies for free. The LAPD wants, there's a website where they go, like, hey, look, they've got some tanks, let's get those. And they can request stuff. The LAPD actually requested a submarine. They requested a submarine. And so I don't know. If you want to read about this stuff, you can read about it in this book by Radley Balco called Rise of the Warrior Cop. And it takes you through the whole journey and how we got to the 10, is it the 1022 or 1023 program? I can't remember. There's actually two of them. So, hello from Salt Lake High, Black Liberal Media. Yeah, I love Black Liberal Media. Do you have a recommendation? That's a comment from John underscore John Jansen at Praying Jerusalem. I like that. Anyways, so that's what happened on the 25th. There's already been, National Guard troops, I believe, is what they were in LA on the street. I shot a video and live stream a bunch of it and talked to them. And they're all very young and they're very early 20s and they are coming from conflict zones, from refugee camps. They're on the street. They have loaded automatic weapons in downtown LA. This was crazy because there was like nobody on the street except for some people kind of ditching the COVID restrictions and getting eating at tables on the sidewalk at restaurants. So they were there. I talked to them. They all seemed kind of they were coming from refugee camps, and these are like young American people, and so. I was obviously very concerned because I'm like, wow, these are like young people who probably have a good dose of PTSD, and here they are, like 2 blocks from Skid Row, down in downtown LA. So really, I just wanted to talk about that and touch base. I've been doing this videoing and documenting police as part of as a journalist in LA for years now, and so. I've never, filed. I've never been part of a class action. I've been beat up by the police so many times. It's just stupid. Not in the way that people of color are beat up, just because I was out there. And it's a numbers game, really. If you're gonna go to all these protests, sooner or later you're gonna get shot with a less lethal projectile. Here's a point about less lethal projectiles. Um, Brian Patrick, damn, this is scary. Yeah, it is kind of scary, isn't it? Except it's also kind of predictable. And here they are. Less lethal technology, and this is something you could read about online a couple years ago. Less lethal technology being developed and sold by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. So when they're out in the street shooting people, they're field testing their product. Oddly, I'm not a conspiracy theorist in any way. I'm somebody who's like has to deal with fact checkers and you know the rules of journalism, but I can't find it anywhere all of a sudden. And I researched it, and I'm pretty sure I wrote about it in a story. But all of a sudden, all these articles that were up about that are gone. So the LA County Sheriff's Department develops and sells less lethal technology. So we're going and like the LAPD, and we're going and like giving and selling and trading this technology to Jerusalem and all over the world. And what it produces is what we've created here. Defund the police, of course, doesn't mean abolish the police. It just means reallocate resources in a way that's effective so people aren't being brutalized because those who aren't trained to interact with somebody who's in a mental health crisis but are trained to react to violent situations with aggression, it's pretty obvious. So I'm thinking that all of these people have, here, let's read a comment. Gretchen Inman, at Gretchen Inman. Has anyone talked to the LAPD about their relationship with the feds? They have some big questions to answer. I wasn't able to check in on the LAPD Police Commission meeting this morning. And I think it's still a Zoom meeting. I don't even know if they're back yet. But so I don't know about that. But that's certainly, you know, it's with these like Blackwater reject people in the streets in Portland. And yeah, I understand there's a lot of people who like to get in the streets in Portland and fight the cops and in Seattle. And I was just living there for a couple of years, so I'm very current on it. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm not a violent person myself, but I think it's a form of protest. And yeah, it's lovely uh, to talk about the violence of windows being broken, but this is about people being killed by police with impunity because of the Policeman's Bill of Rights, and everything that they've written into the law to be able to, kill black and brown people with impunity. And so, you know, only one watching. Hi, hi, Saif, Gretchen Inman. It is very important, Gretchen. So, in the middle of, and this is the last thing I really want to talk about, and I'm going to show you my foot again where I got shot in the ankle. And it's getting all bruised up. The other thing I want to talk about that I started out with is this. You know, I want to talk about Black Lives Matter because I think it's really good for white people to talk about Black Lives Matter. Like, get those words in your mouth. I'm not necessarily interested to hear your opinion on it, but to really wrap your head around this and from an observational perspective, because really that's all I have. I've been watching BLMLA, which is the first Black Lives Matter. I mean, that's the origin of it, it's the beginning of it, at the, I believe it was the Zimmerman verdict uprising in for Trayvon Martin. And that was the big uprising, the big march where that Black Lives Matter LA says is their first action. That's their birthday. So that was 7 years ago. And I want to say, I've really watched them and been to like so many actions and learned so much just from listening beyond like my defenses, because my perspective, uh, Roberta Freeman, hope you stay okay, Sam. You're doing wonderful. Thank you, Roberta. It's Roberta Freeman. She's a famous singer. From my perspective, I've learned so much from them because all I had to do was just listen and start to understand, like, where am I guarded? Where am I uncomfortable hearing this? And, by that time for me, I mean, I've been down in this field of profound grief from the Black community in LA, working as a journalist for so long that, I've kind of gotten really used to the ideology and understand a lot of it, and it's just from listening. And so, in the same way that I'm listening to them, I'm also listening to John Jansen. What have you learned? Well, at Praying Jerusalem. Well, John Jansen, what I've learned from them is, first of all, uh, to begin to understand like the wound and the level of grief, collective grief that these people are talking about at these actions, and to start to really feel that beyond just, my middle class white defenses, and start to really hear what they're saying about, you know, hear what they're saying about the damage that's been inflicted on them. So my perspective really is, nothing's ever going to be right in this country till we start making reparations for slavery and stop the indigenous genocide. So what I learned was that there's a lot of people who've just been crushed by this system, and parents who've lost their children. Black Lives Matter LA did a 56-day tent camp in 2016, I believe it was, at City Hall. It was called Decolonize LA City Hall. And it was a really amazing action because it was run by women, because, BLMLA, it's not exclusively, but I think on their website it says they're a Black nationalist womanist organization through a queer and trans lens. I don't know if they changed that. It used to say that. So I learned, John, to answer your question, and I'm taking your question seriously. I'm not sure if you're talking shit because you're saying, when did Haps turn liberal? So I don't know if compassion is liberal. I don't feel liberal. But what happened was that I met a bunch of people whose kids are dead and who had their kids killed. And during this action, this Decolonize LA City Hall 54-day, I think it was 56-day tent camp, uh, they killed a couple more people. And one of them was a 14-year-old kid named Jesse Romero, and they shot him in the back. Hi, Paul Argier. Uh, they shot him in the back while I was running away. And if I had, $1 for every time a defense attorney laughed in my face when I said, "Hey, but the cop said he had a gun," because after a while you start to understand, I started to understand what was going on just by watching. So I learned how to be an ally. I learned how to, that's my goal, to be like a good ally, to just like get in the back. Hi, Brett. Get in the back of the march and be quiet. And, I have a platform as I'm a journalist in LA, and give people the opportunity to like amplify their voice, but like not for profit, not for to enhance my career, or not to do anything other than just step back and be of service and be like, here, people have been listening to me for a long time. Here's one from Meg LaFaux. Sam, I have GOP Trump supporter on my feed who calls BLM a Marxist organization, which is ridiculous. They claim BLM is taking money and not saying where it's going. Where do you suggest I learn more facts about BLM so I can tell the people the truth? Yeah. So again, everything I'm going to say about BLM is from observational, just from watching them, from being at their actions as a journalist, but also just sitting in the circle because they let me. And what I would say is this, that all I know about Black Lives Matter is from Black Lives Matter LA, BLM LA, and everything's on their website, blmla.com or .org, and they've got everything up there. So it's like but I mean, it's like the Black Bloc. It's like an ideology, right? Black Lives Matter and a movement and all these things, and that's how it looks to me from out here. But in LA, it seems to be a lot of some single moms, starting with Melina Abdullah, Dr. Melina Abdullah, who's the head of Pan-African Studies at Cal State, LA, and I think she's about to be the dean. She's been out front for a long time. Patrice Cullors, other people, but the that's what I've seen. I've seen a lot of academics, single moms. I've seen some of the most well organized, like collaborative, interactive organizing in Los Angeles coming from them that I've ever seen. So I think it's very sophisticated, and that's my observation. And anything else, obviously, talk to them. I don't know about them taking money. I don't know about anything like that, but that's what I know. Very consistent, steadfast, powerful. When the police chief of Los Angeles resigns, that's a lot of power, and they definitely did that, and lots of other things. And they have a site. Melina Abdullah keeps talking about. I heard her on the radio. It's called publicbudget.org, publicbudget.com. I'm checking, and so publicbudget.com is, I guess, yeah. I gotta. Oh, I have to verify my contact information. More on that later. Is that 5 meter cloth says, is that Paramahansa on your hat? It is Paramahansa Yogananda on my hat. Jai Guru. So that's my take on what happened on the 25th. I've seen the cops go off and start like shooting people at protests in LA so many times. One time in like 2011 or 12, and I can't remember if I videoed this or if I did video this, but I can't remember if I saw it or if I saw a picture, if I shot it, but it was happening like 10 feet away from me. And they shot a girl in the face. I think she was 18 with a projectile, a less lethal projectile. And it just split her face apart. And there was blood everywhere. So I've seen people get shot with these a bunch of times, and they're very dangerous. And I'm seeing a lot of young people out in the street, and I'm seeing a lot of young people in the street who are like at their first protest and not really, maybe don't know how to navigate the LAPD and to how to keep it safe. And so that's very disturbing to me because I know how violent they can be. And that's without any additional troops, without any additional, federal police like they have in Portland, or DHS, and whoever else is already out in the streets in Los Angeles. So that's very worrisome. Alex Kasich, at Alex Kasich. Hi, Alex. How have the BLM protests evolved since you started covering them? Here's what I'll say about the BLM protests. They have been a love bomb. There's so many young people out there, and the pervasive narrative that I was hearing for quite a while was like the kids are in the street because school's closed, the bars are closed, the gym's closed, and the beach is closed, and they've been locked up, and so they're just venting, and they're out in the street with all of their hormonal energy, and that is not what I saw when I was out there. I was out there with a filmmaker, and we interviewed a bunch of people. I was live streaming, and yes, there was a bunch of young white girls with young white women with booty shorts and their fist up, and all of them that I talked to, and I made a point to talk to a lot, were very clear on why they were there. They were talking about policy, they were talking about voting, they were talking about police violence, and there was definitely a party after almost all of these protests, and they were parties, with DJs and stuff, and everybody dancing. No cops, no violence. So I was very interested to see who was there and talk to them. And so I went to all of them, starting from the first one, which was, gosh, what was that? It's over a month ago now. So I don't even remember the date of the first action in LA. It was at Pan Pacific Park, and it was the day that Beverly Hills that there was a retail liberation action in Beverly Hills. And so here's the evolution of the protest to answer that question, Alex. Okay, so and it's this. The love bomb element is still pervasive, and that's what's going on there. Looting, yeah, there was some looting. It's really terrible. I hate to see people get their businesses looted. I hate to see any kind of violence, but not nearly as much as I hate to see people get killed and beat down and abused by law enforcement as a general practice. So, thanks for that. So